Welcome to Practical Product Management. We are here to talk about the ways in which product management is done in context. There's obviously lots of great books out there, lots of theory, but we love to talk about how product management happens in the context. And we like to talk to interesting people who are either in product management or adjacent to it. And so today we're talking to Mike. And so I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself, and then we'll dive in and start talking. So tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, Leah. Well, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. Really great to be here. I'm Mike. I've basically been running an agency for about 24 years now. I'm really focused on B2B. Before that, I worked in marketing in the semiconductor industry. And then prior to that, long time ago, I was an engineer. And just recently, I've actually moved to a chairman role. So we've got someone now doing all the hard work running the agency day to day.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, it's really exciting to have you here, Mike. You said a term that I think a lot of the people that listen to our podcast are familiar with, but potentially don't understand very well and might think it's boring. So you said the word B2B. Talk to us about why B2B is not boring and it's actually a super fun place to operate.
So B2B absolutely is not boring. The problem is like everywhere else, because I'm really focused on the marketing side of product. It's easy to make boring ads, and you can make boring ads wherever you go. But the great thing about B2B is that the purchases are really complex. So if you're looking at consumer marketing, you're looking at people quite often, they're making, impulse buys. They're not really thinking about it. Even if you're selling something like a car, you've maybe got a couple of people, and I know certainly in the UK, primarily it's women who buy cars now. And maybe the husband gets, opportunity to influence. But basically, it's a pretty simple, straightforward decision. If you're looking at B2B, you're looking at incredibly complicated decisions. So decisions that involve lots of people, they've all got different objectives. They all want to achieve something different out of it. And also, you're selling a product that can be incredibly complicated as well. So you get these really long projects where you've got to convince a large number of people. And that's so interesting. You've really got to understand, how a finance director thinks versus how an engineer thinks versus how the CEO thinks. And they're all different. You get to work with all these different people. So it's just so much fun because there's so much variety. And of course, at the end of it, a B2B sale is normally quite a large sale. So most B2B companies are selling things that, can be in the thousands, can be in the millions. And we've got clients, who sell solutions that are literally tens of millions of pounds. And that's so exciting when you finally get that deal closed and you can really see it and link it back to all the work you've been doing.
I think I think you're right. And I kind of said that a little bit tongue in cheek because both Leah and I are on your side on this discussion. I think it's really interesting from a product management perspective and not something that a lot of our listeners may have considered. Typically when you're working on an easier consumer product, you just think about your end user and solving their problems. But I think the complexity around not just solving a business problem, but all of the personalities related to both the approval of and the purchase of and the use of a thing that goes into B2B is really, it's quite complex. Do you have any frameworks that you use or you would suggest people start to think about when you start trying to get your head around all the people and stuff related to those B2B conversations?
Oh, that's such a good question. And the B2B, the whole product question in B2B is completely different to consumer. There's a lot more customization, a lot more tweaking products for customers rather than selling a standard product. But I think the way most people think about this is by building personas. And so most people will build a persona, and very simplistic B2B marketers will build a persona that's their ideal customer. Some of the smarter marketers might build a couple of different personas and maybe they've got a buyer and an influencer. But actually what you have is what in the UK we call a decision-making unit. In America, you call a buying committee, and that can be really big. And you can have lots of people involved in that. And I think what goes wrong in B2B is that people forget about building this proper model of the buying committee. And so they tend to go on fads. And so what they'll do is they'll focus really hard on their buyer. And in our case, a lot of our clients sell to engineers. So focus on the engineer. It'll be technical marketing. It'll be detail. It'll be facts. It'll be tables. It'll be graphs. And, the CEO is kind of like, it's not really understanding that. It's not my job. It's not my background. And so you don't build any kind of impact with the CEO. And then suddenly what you'll see is a B2B firm going, yeah, actually, we want to do business press. That's the classic thing. We want to do business press because we want to reach the C-suite. And so they rush off and they try and get into, the Financial Times or Forbes or whatever. And they're still using this same engineer message quite often. So it doesn't often work. Yeah. And what really works is if you build out this model properly and you really try to understand these people. And I've got to admit, I know your listeners all around the world. I'm British. I cringe a bit when we do personas and you give them names. Whereas I think Americans probably quite like that.
We love our names.
They were like, Susan and Tom, we're going somewhere.
And it's like, what would Tom do? And how would Jim feel? And you're like cringing. It's like it's a made-up person. But actually, it's a really effective way to discuss, what's going to happen. You can almost build those discussions that will happen in your customers by having these imaginary people around an imaginary table. And if you do that, you suddenly realize that, Tom, the engineer, he really does care about those graphs. So you better keep sending those out because otherwise he's not going to be interested. But, if you've got Kate and she's the CEO, she doesn't care about that. She wants to know what the risk is, how much money am I going to make, what's the benefit? And it's very high level messages. So you then realize you've got to build very different campaigns to those different personas. And that then, if companies do it right, takes you away from this like flip-flopping between technical, no business press, no technical, no business press, and makes it a much more integrated campaign.
Yeah. It's funny. It reminds me, Marilyn will probably resonate with this, but it reminds me like when we both worked at Amazon and, they have this whole principle of the empty chair. Like there's always an empty chair in the room that represents the customer. But I think what I remember happening is that empty chair, depending on who was in the room, different people might have a different idea of who was sitting in the chair. Right. So if I was a platform PM running the payment space, but the guy in my room was somebody who ran Amazon Digital, we had different people sitting in the chair because I had a different customer than they had. We ultimately had the same customer, but they were my customer and this was their, so often I think it takes a moment of like, let's define who's in that chair and do we need to pull up a few extras, right? Because maybe it's not one chair.
Yeah. And I mean, the Amazon idea of the empty chairs it's a brilliant idea, but it's very consumer marketing.
Yeah.
Because, typically consumer sales are to one or two people. It's pretty straightforward, whereas B2B, you want an empty meeting room. And that's really different.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I guess that's my point is that when I worked at Amazon and Marilyn and I worked there together, part of what I owned was the payments platform. Yeah. And in order to get things through, businesses, 80 Amazon businesses came to me and said, hey, we need the payments platform to do this. And so I had to think in terms of themes. The person in my empty chair was those businesses and their consumer, right? Mm-hmm. But those were different. So I had to think in terms of like, what does digital need and what does Prime need and what does Fresh need and what, and had to figure out how to sit that person in the chair. And they weren't always the consumer. Right. And so that then meant we had to have a slightly different conversation, right? Because it was like, wait a minute, how am I going to do this in a way that's broad enough for all of you as a business customer? Because they were ultimately businesses showing up to get business goods from part of the platform. Right. And so that's the only reason I bring it up. I think you're absolutely right. It is designed around the consumer because that is who Amazon's thinking of when they talk about that empty chair. But I do think that like our job as product managers is this understanding of all of the stakeholders. That's part of the job. And so I think in the B2B space that it's just blown out into more complication often.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think, when you think about payment platforms, you've actually got B2B and B2C at the same time, which is, as you say, is much more complex.
Yeah. Your bio says you're a self-confessed geek. So welcome to the club because, we are also self-confessed geeks. But when you talk about personas and really understanding who's at the table, one of the things that I have recently been playing with, and I would love your opinion on, is building GPTs to represent those personas. Because like a persona is usually something you stick on the wall and it's got like 4 bits of information and a picture and you write a name like Sally, the flower vendor. But I think one of the things that we've been trying to do is record and collect information from these broad personas and inform a GPT to play that role in a more conversational state. What have you seen working, not working? What tools are coming to play in this area? Like, read us all into the good stuff, please.
So I love you're doing it. I mean, we call it synthetic personas.
Yep.
So, you build a persona. It's not a real person, but it's built out of your research.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good. I think the interesting thing we found is if you look at a lot of the work that's going on, a lot of people are trying to use synthetic personas to generate survey responses.
Yeah.
And so they'll generate 1,000 synthetic personas. What we've found, and I apologize to all the companies that do all of this because they're super smart and they do some great stuff. But what we found is the survey result is almost pre-programmed in as you build those personas.
I hate surveys. We'll go back to that. Like, surveys are the devil's work.
Yeah. So I don't love that. What I love is creating a synthetic persona with all the knowledge I've got and then talking to them like a person. So
Yes.
The qualitative stuff that you get out, I think personally, much more valuable than trying to do quantitative.
Yes. I mean, so sorry for anybody that's ever worked for me or mentioned the word survey in front of me. Surveys are tools of lazy people. And I think most people already know the answer before they put a survey out there, and they have no idea what they're going to do with the data. And even if they tell you a story about what they're going to do with the data, they don't actually really need it. There's a different way to get that information. And so surveys hurt my heart. And I love the fact that you've said that you have real conversations with these personas versus some survey.
Yeah. No, I think surveys are good sometimes. So we do a lot of PR and we create a lot of surveys that we know what the answer is going to be. And that answer is going to give us the story we want to then promote it. So, I mean, the classic and
then
push
you can
poll
say
type thing.
4 out of 5 dentists recommend my toothpaste.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, have some free toothpaste. What would you recommend? I think those sort of polls have some value in marketing. But I think what we see in B2B particularly is it's really, really hard to get anything like a representative audience responding to a survey.
Yeah.
And so you'll see people with surveys and they've got 40 people, 60 people, 80 people responding. And they'll say, yeah, definitely, this is 5% more important than that. You go, no, just one person said that. If they'd flipped the other way, then it would have been the other way. It's like, so I think surveys are very dangerous because they're really hard to do. It's really hard to get anybody to fill in the survey. It's certainly incredibly hard to get a representative survey. And so you've got something that's inherently biased, and then you place far too much kind of authority on it because, if you've done maths and being a self-confessed geek, I've done statistics and quite like statistics, you then very quickly realize that actually some of these surveys where they say this is more important than that, actually, it's more likely to be down to randomness than it is actually down to being a real difference.
Yeah. The randomness is it's a like soul crusher, right? When you realize this, but the data said the thing, and then you do the thing, and then it's like, well, that didn't work. And everybody's like, why didn't it work? And it's like, you go back and you're like, that might have been random.
Yeah.
that might not have been exactly what we were looking for. Yeah. 100%.
What other tools do you use to sort of pull through personas, especially in a B2B context? Like, you have a wealth of experience,
So there's only one tool that works really well.
Okay.
That's talking to people.
Whatever. I don't want to talk to people.
True.
We've got an online persona tool on our website, and you can build these tools that walk you through creating a persona. But the reality is the best personas are created by the people who've talked to those individuals.
Yeah.
And they've actually met Tom, the engineer, or Kate, the CEO, and they know what they're like. And so to me, I think, we're in a world where everybody wants automation, everybody wants tools, but actually sometimes understanding people really matters. Yeah. Obviously, if you're really smart and you've looked at behavioral psychology, you can actually extrapolate quite a lot from your interviews. But again, it's still very much, using brain power rather than magically pressing a button and getting a persona at the end.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and this maybe sounds overly simplistic, but I think when our product teams in B2B or B2C space are talking to real customers and getting their actual feedback, I actually think it makes such an impact on them to hear it from the person that is going to use or might use what we're doing or already uses it. That I think it actually, I always say it sort of is it's almost like you plug into creativity when they talk to somebody, right? The minute that they're talking to a real person, the creative brain is like, because you can actually tie a problem to an actual problem statement to something you heard someone actually say, instead of what we all sit around and talk about together. Because what's the thing we always say, Marilyn? You are not the customer.
Yeah, if you're wearing the badge of the company that you're in, you're not the customer. Even though you think you might use it, you're too close. I think, Leah, what you said is super important, especially when you're talking to that person in the context of how they will use your tool. And this is where I'm a huge fan of the lean canvas and watching people in the moment trying to do the thing. Because even talking to the person, if they're, in an interview room, you're going to get a different response. And you really want to see people in context to get a good view. But I do think that's where, where some flashes of brilliance come from, for sure.
100%. Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, I want to ask I want to take us on a tiny little adventure that Marilyn and I like to go on every now and then. I have a different question. So we have had a couple conversations with folks about this concept of product-led growth. And that, there's such a, this place of product alongside marketing, owning the funnel, thinking about funnel conversion, all of this. And that there's almost like a new creature being created out in the universe around product managers that are product-led growth people. And that, if you don't know how to do that, you don't know what you're doing. And it's, all this stuff. And so we teased one of our guests, who's a friend of mine. We were like, you don't even have a real job. What are you talking about? That's not a real job. And he's like, it is. I'm the whatever VP of blah, blah, blah. We're like, it's not even a thing. That's a product manager's job. So I'm curious, when you think about sort of product-led growth and what people are saying about that, how have you seen that work in the B2B space? Because it isn't a traditional go get them to click and bring them through the funnel necessarily. It usually has longer lead times and all of that. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think product-led growth, it's a really difficult thing in a lot of B2B environments. Yeah. Firstly, the one thing I'd say is, even if you're in a SaaS product and you're, iterating all the time, the growth is customer-led. Really is customers. They're the ones spending the money. So, what product-led growth is really doing is it's optimizing the product for the customers. So the customers are then more likely to buy. And I think that's a way to look at it. The challenge you have in B2B is often the long development cycles that are involved in these products. They're big, complex products. Some of them have lots of approvals. We work with a lot of semiconductor companies. So they're making silicon chips, and designing a silicon chip's not easy today. So it can take teams of tens, hundreds of people, and it can take easily a year to develop a product. You design it, and then you send it away to be manufactured, and it basically goes and gets cooked in what's called a fab, and that takes a few weeks. And then it gets packaged somewhere else into a little plastic package, and then it gets put on a board, and then it gets sent back to you, and then you plug the board in, and if you're lucky, there's no smoke coming out of your chip, which happens occasionally, less so now, but certainly, 30 years ago in the sort of earlier days of semiconductors, quite often people plug this product in that's cost them a huge amount of money, and it just went up in flames, because the tools weren't as good. But basically, that's really hard to do what someone who's in the digital side would call product-led growth, because your iteration cycles are potentially a year or more. So by the time you've changed it, your customers have already moved on a year. And I think that's really hard. So in B2B, you've got to take a slightly different approach. You can't continue to be iterating and testing. It's too expensive and it's too slow. So you do have to really get under the skin of the customer. And you have to understand not what the customer wants today, but what the customer wants in a year's time or 2 years' time, if that's the lead time to develop the product.
Yeah, that's a really challenging space to try to achieve and maintain product market fit. And that cycle time and the handoffs you were describing between sort of like people understanding their customers, marketing trying to talk to their customers, and the people turning that into some sort of requirement and product, and then the manufacture and shipping of the thing. What do you think? What do you think? I think it's pretty easy to describe why it can be troublesome, because there's a lot of handoffs and a lot of time. What have you seen work well in trying to reduce that conversation gap, or like the mismatch between people as you go along this that could actually harm your product market fit over time?
So it's really interesting. I'm going to give you two answers to this.
Okay.
And they're exactly the opposite thing.
Okay.
Our favorite.
Even better. Let's do that.
So one thing that works really well is to pick a lead customer. This is really common. And if you want to sell into electric vehicles, you pick one of the big car companies, and that could be a Tesla, it could be a Volkswagen, whatever. And you go to them and you say, what do you want us to develop for 2 years' time? Tell us exactly what you want. We'll design exactly what you want. And you work very, very closely. And obviously, the closer you work with one vendor, the more they're prepared to share. Sorry, one customer, the more they're prepared to share.
Yep.
And so you get a lot of information, and you can build a product, and it's hopefully ideally suited for them. Otherwise, you've done something very wrong. But also, it should really be suited for the whole market, because it's unlikely that Volkswagen is going to do anything, that different to Audi or BMW or even Ford. The problem is that customer's guessing as well. They're trying to predict the future. So sometimes they get it wrong.
Right.
Sometimes it's brilliant. Sometimes they get it wrong. And you've picked basically a company you thought was going to, be the leader in 2 years' time. And actually what happens is they crash, they lose market share, and you've picked the wrong partner. So obviously the way to go then is to go and talk to a large number of people in the market. But then the problem is you tend to get kind of homogenized feedback. And it kind of falls to kind of the lowest common denominator product. So you spread out all the requirements, and you miss the one or two things that are really cool. That if you add would make a huge difference. It's the classic thing that, I think Henry Ford said, if I asked, my customers what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. And so, it's really hard to go and ask people something when they don't know what's possible. So it really depends on balancing between getting in deep with customers, understanding the market, and then sometimes just saying, we're going to go do this. We think it's the right thing to do.
Got it. I probably made a face. I don't know if you know this about me, but we've now been talking for 22 minutes. I don't have a poker face. My poker name, you know how like poker players have like cool names like the Snake Eye or like whatever. When I used to play poker, my poker name was the Donor, because but you said something, there's that quote by Henry Ford that I always kind of have a visceral reaction to, because while it's true, I also think that if you would have looked if Henry Ford would have looked more deeply at the problem space with a little bit more of an innovative mindset, he would have realized that people just want to get somewhere faster and easier, right? And I mean, they would have asked for a faster horse, but if you would have asked the like 5 whys beyond that, so I do think that what I want to sort of warn the general audience about is that quote can be used as a weapon to like not ask the customer what they want.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's wrong. I think you need to go in with the spirit of curiosity and really try to understand the root problem, not what they're describing as a solution, because people will always give you a solution. And like really early on in my career, I worked for a retail foreign exchange brokerage, and we used to have people send us their margin account money, and we held it all in US dollars. And, we were trying to ask our customers what would make them happier. And they were like, cheaper wires. And what they really wanted was faster access to their funds, with no or little fees. And by pulling it back to those root problems, we were able to come up with a pretty innovative solution that didn't include wires at all. And I think that's what you're describing is like, how do you pull back and think about the macro? So if I made a face at you at the Henry Ford thing, it's not because you were wrong. I totally agree with you. That quote gives me a rash.
Yeah.
But I think
And I love the way you called me out on it, Marilyn, actually, because the honest truth is if Henry Ford really went and asked people what they wanted, they'd have probably said, well, what we want is we want the railroad.
Yeah.
We want a personal train that only we have, and I
train.
travel it, no one else does, and it goes everywhere. And it can go on short distances as well as long distance. That sounds really like a car, doesn't it?
Right, it does.
You just don't need the tracks. Yeah. But I think often for me, it's about respect. It's respecting that the customer has a point of view and they're trying. If you're asking them a question, most of our customers are trying to give us good information.
Yeah.
You're talking to someone who's really pissed off, they're trying to give you good information. You're talking to someone that's really happy with what you do, they're trying to give you good information. Like so respecting that they have a point of view and then saying, based on that point of view, let me get to the heart of what we're trying to solve for, right? And what do we know? Let's not throw out what we know, but what do we know? What does the data say? How do we then also respect the data we have and marry those two up? That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's the person who's like, even internally, when you own a product team and some other team appears and says, build me this. And you're like, what problem do you want me to solve again?
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, no, I don't, that's not the conversation I want to have. I want you to build me this. It's like, no, I want you to tell me what problem you have so that I'm happy to hear your suggested solution because I'm going to learn something from your suggested solution, but don't tell me what to build. I mean, let's be honest. How many of us have said the phrase, don't tell me what to build? Right?
All the time.
But it's not because I think I know. It's because I want you to describe the problem so that I can ask 10 more questions, right? I have more questions. And if you just tell me what to build, I'll never know what the question was, Yeah. And so I think that to me for me, it's often a respect game. Like, how will I show up and respect every participant has a perspective to bring to the table. And then I have to sort of be the person who tries to bring that together. That's what makes the job hard and fun.
Right? But I think B2B offers sorry, you got my brain working. Thank you, Mike. This has actually been an awesome conversation, but you've got my brain working now and we're all in trouble. It's not just about building the product for B2B, is it? Because when you think about all the people what did you call it? The room full of people that make the decision, the committee.
Yeah, the buying committee or decision-making unit. Yeah.
Right. So now you have to have something that not only solves a business problem that someone's willing to pay for, but like your InfoSec people probably need to be able to review it for security. Your CFO or your security people also have their requirements that people want to be seen to be better at their job. So like there's all these characters that you now have to think about when you're both building and marketing a product that may not ever even use your product.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, certainly that's a big issue. The people who typically sign off the money aren't the people who are going to use your product because they're way more senior. And I think also the other thing as well, I mean, we've talked a lot about this is a product podcast. I probably shouldn't say this, but in B2B, more and more, people don't buy products. People buy vendors.
Yeah. They buy vendors or solutions. Yeah.
And so what they're looking for is and I hate the word partner because at the end of the day, you've got someone selling stuff and they want money off the guy buying it. And it's that simple. It's a transaction. But the customers, they want to know that they're working with someone they can go forward. I mean, if you imagine I'll give you a simple example. If you were IT support and your company, you were supporting, even a small company, maybe 500 people, and your company bought a different laptop every time somebody joined, and you had 500 different laptops to support, and it would just be unbelievable. Yeah. If all the laptops were all exactly the same, so much easier to support, exactly what happens. If you have to go and replace a part, something breaks, you know what it is. You can probably take it out of another laptop you've got. So I think more and more, and this is a really big B2B thing, B2B buyers really are looking for partners they can work with in the long term. And so they're buying the supplier, they're not buying the product.
Interesting. So interoperability becomes like a big deal. Like, how do
Can
you
you
fit
solve
in?
more problem than one, right? Can
Yeah.
you solve more than one problem for me if I'm
And
spending?
can you fit into their existing ecosystem, especially if you're trying to come in with something new? Like, if you don't fit, you don't help.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you're trying to come in and start winning in a new customer, you've got to work with what they've got. Obviously,
Yeah.
they're not going to throw everything out. But equally, if you're working with a customer, that customer is going to expect interoperability from you because they know about lock-in. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
And so they're going to absolutely expect you to be able to interoperate with other people. So it's really tough. I mean, I think the world is really tough. If we look at what's happened, almost everybody's got access to pretty much leading edge manufacturing. Whatever you make, you can go and get that made by somebody who's one of the best in the world. People can access the technology, people can access ideas. It's not very difficult. So it's really hard to get a lead. And so when you do win customers, it's all about making sure that actually make those customers successful in B2B, or, the product makes them happy at the end of the day, if you look at a more consumer view.
But it's so funny because as you guys are both talking, I'm thinking about really early in my career being in meetings where, I was the product person, but when product managers, I'm going to back up. When product managers say to me, like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm like, bullshit. Bullshit, you're not a salesperson, right? Because I think about early in my career, because I worked in payments for years, right? And being in rooms at banks, for instance, and realizing that the one guy holding out over there was the one I had to convince. Right. And my boss being like, talk that guy into it. Right. Like realizing that, like, oh, that guy from legal or IT or whatever is the one guy in the room that everyone else is like, Bob. Right. And you're like, oh, shit, what does Bob know that I don't know right now? Right. And so but that's where this interoperability comes in, because that's usually the guy who knows the thing that isn't going to work or is going to be a hurdle to overcome. And so now I'm like, sit by me at lunchtime, Bob, because I want to know what's going on, right? Because you're my new best friend. Link arms, right? But to me, that's what I think some young product managers, especially if they've only worked in B2C, miss, is that when you're having these conversations, you are in the room going, okay, who is the person who has the keys, and I need to figure out how they'll give me a spare set. Right. And there is an element of that is selling. I'm not asking you to lie. It should never be a lie, but I'm asking you to figure out how to talk to that person about what you can do for them. And I think some young product managers miss that because it's not in the book that they read, right? Necessarily. So
I think the thing about selling is so important. I think the interesting thing for me about B2B versus B2C, we talked a lot about that, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. When you're a consumer and you're buying something for yourself, a lot of it is around optimism and opportunity. You're buying something that's going to be cool. I mean, I recently bought a new road bike. I'd love to imagine I was like a professional cyclist. I really am not, particularly when I start going uphill, and I'm too big, I'm too unfit, I'm too old, I'm never going to go. But I get on that bike and just a little bit of me feels like I am. And it's amazing. It's super positive. If you look at B2B, basically most of the decision-making process is all about fear. It's all about reducing risk. Because most buyers are in a situation where there's 4, 5, 6, 20 suppliers that will give you a product that's good enough. And typically the best product is not that much better than the average product. It's probably a little bit better, but at the end of the day, give it another 6 months, that average vendor will probably catch up. So buyers want to buy from a supplier that's not going to let them down. So I think this risk, this fear, this wanting to be reassured, that's super important. I mean, that's great because we're seeing a lot of marketing, particularly getting taken over by AI, but there's still definitely a need for people because people are much better at reassuring than machines are.
Yeah. That is, and even if I think if there's a perception of machines, people are less reassured. There was an article I was reading where someone put out like a customer service agent. I don't remember what it was. I'm gonna get this totally wrong. No one correct me because I'm not gonna look at the comments. And it was like, they had an AI agent named Trevor or something, and it had a really high satisfaction rate. And as soon as they told people that it was an agent versus a real human, they changed nothing else. The satisfaction rate dropped. Like, I think people still want to talk to people.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we work.
AI is good.
Yeah. Sorry, Marilyn. We work with a client who supplies, AI customer service. They supply these agents.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because you talk to them and their biggest concern is working out when to hand the conversation off from the AI agent to a real human.
Yeah.
Because actually, if you've, for example, got a delayed flight and you type in, my flight's delayed, I need to, to change it to another flight, or, it's been cancelled, please get me another flight. If the AI agent can go, I've booked you on this flight, is this okay? You're done, you're happy, it's fine.
Yeah.
If it gets complicated, if there's problems, then you start needing to get transferred over to that human. And so it's really interesting that there is an area where AI works, where machines work, where people trust them, but it's very transactional, I think, still. And where you need someone to empathize, I mean, having a chatbot empathize with you, it really doesn't work.
I mean, I'm now totally suspicious of all the AI that tells me I'm smart. Right? It's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm like, it's not even a good idea. What do you mean it's a great idea?
Exactly right.
It's not even an idea. Like, stop it, ChatGPT. It's not even an idea, right?
Yeah, and the new ChatGPT is much better, actually. It's much less, oh, you're awesome, that's amazing, I don't even know why I'm here, but
brilliant.
I just,
You're right, I am brilliant. If ever you need a boost, just go ask. It'll tell you how smart you are. And it's like, am I as good at the competition? Yes. Meanwhile, the competition says the same thing, right? So, yeah.
You're so good.
Yeah. I want to ask one question based on something else I saw in your profile. There, you have this kind of idea of, like the nerds versus norms, like the normal people, right? The moment that a product shifts from sort of early adopters to mainstream, right? And how does that show up in B2B? And what should product managers do about it? How should they think about it?
That's such a great question. So nerds versus norms is a really interesting nerd phrase, because it's actually interesting. I think most people think that really nerdy people are not that self-aware, but actually most nerdy people know they're not norms. They're not real people. So it's okay. These real people are different and we don't understand them.
Right.
And actually, I mean, to answer your question directly, Leah, just go buy a book. There was a book written in 1980 something, I think, by Geoffrey Moore called Crossing the Chasm. Okay. And anyone who's really old like me, who was in technology back at the end of last century, God, that sounds so long ago, would absolutely know this book. And what he says was, you get this normal product adoption curve that looks very much like a bell curve, and you get the early adopters, you get the majority, and then you get the laggards. Yeah. And he said that's not true when it comes to technology. And he said the problem is you've got these people, and we'll call them nerds. He was much more polite, but, basically, people who love technology, who'll try technology out, who'll go and buy something because it's new and because it's does something you couldn't do before. They might find out it's rubbish and they never needed to do that thing in the first place, but they'll still buy it because it's really cool. And that's a very different decision-making process from norms, the ordinary people who look at it and go, is it really going to help me? Is it really going to benefit my life? I mean, I was using, this shows how Palm Pilots. So, back in the day, you two are probably too young to remember them. But,
oh, no. No, we're not.
But back in the day, a few nerds had what was called PDAs, which was personal digital assistants. And they were little things you could write. You had your calendar and, it was like a diary. You wrote them and they were fundamentally impractical. And didn't work all the time, and got things wrong, and lost. All sorts of issues.
Stylus too that we had to pull out, and
little stylus to write, and you couldn't write real letters. You had to write like fake letters because it couldn't recognize real ones, and just all sorts of really funny things. And nerds put up with it, and they were like, "It's all worth it because I can have everything I need in this little machine." And the Palm Pilot never crossed the chasm; it just stayed with nerds, basically. Whereas what happened was, someone like Steve Jobs can really understand technology, and he can make technology very accessible and make it work. And, I actually think one of Steve Jobs' greatest achievements, if anybody uses an Apple product and there's a problem, the first reaction is to blame yourself. So the Apple product crashes, you go, what have I done? What did I do wrong? Oh no, it's me. Because people are so convinced it's going to work. And it's because he's so taken out this issue of complexity and problems and failures, and people just assume it's going to work. And I think that's a great example of two different products, one that didn't cross the chasm and one that was straight over there and into the majority almost immediately.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember the moment that I had to make the decision to give up all the little keys on my BlackBerry for a phone that had a stylus, use my finger and all. And I was like, oh, I don't know, but I have these keys.
Yeah.
It's
well, I'd argue the BlackBerry was actually a mainstream product. I mean, it wasn't as successful as the iPhone, but yeah. I mean, a lot of people used it. It was great.
Marilyn and I we built a product once, and a man that Jeff Bezos, let's just say it, I'll just cut to it, was like, will this work on my BlackBerry? And we were like, no. Absolutely not. And luckily we didn't have to say it. It wasn't us.
Yeah.
It was someone else who had to say, no, Jeff, you'll have to get a better phone than that. So we're like, no, it will not. So, all right, let's do lightning round. Are we ready?
Awesome.
We can actually jump right into lightning round with that, with you talking about that. I would love to know what piece of technology you first fell in love with.
Oh, I first fell in love with. Yeah, so there was a home computer called the ZX80 in the UK. I don't know if you know, there's some listeners in the UK will remember this, people outside won't. And it was about the time that the first Apple computers came out, and it was famously advertised as being powerful enough to run a power station, which I think was one of the first, if not the first, cases where someone had to change an advert because it was lying about technology. Certainly about lying about computers, but it was so cool. And I got this computer. We had to wait, I think it was 10 months late in delivery. And when it arrived, it had certain little problems, like to make it run and not get too hot, you had to put a cup of ice on the top of it.
Nice.
So I ran my little ZX80 with a little cup of ice. But anyway, that was the first thing I really fell in love with. That was amazing.
I love that. Marilyn, what's yours?
I mean, I think I realized over the course of this conversation that I'm a nerd, and I don't know if I'd ever had that self-realization or not, so therapy. I love everything. The things I'm currently obsessed about are, have you guys seen the Flora plants? They're LED plants that react to either the weather or your music, or like you can get little house plants or you can get huge tree installations, and I'm freaking obsessed. So I'm obsessed with that. I don't need one. I'm trying to convince myself not to buy one. I might be failing that. And then Leah also knows I really want a robot dog. Like I want a spot dog from Boston Dynamics to run around my property and like be my guard dog. And
That's so
I love it. I love it. I'm the early adopter. Like I'll buy it and love it, even if it doesn't really work, and then not use it ever again.
right.
I have a whole closet full of dead bodies of things that I tried and have discarded.
She doesn't have dead bodies, people. That's not real. You're NSA. If you're listening, she does not have real dead bodies in her house.
They're robots.
They're robots, robot bodies, technology bodies, not real bodies.
What about you, Leah?
No problem. Just making sure you're safe.
Thank you.
For the first thing I remember falling in love with was I remember getting one of those little calculator watches
Oh yeah.
and just being like, yes, I am now so cool because I can calculate things on my wrist. And it's like, I couldn't do much, but I could do it on my wrist, right? And I was so happy about it. And that was a big deal in my family. I had to save all my money. It was like a whole thing because we didn't have anything. And so that was like all of my birthday money and, anything I could save for a while. And I just remember and of course it lasted a hot minute because it was ultimately, by our standards now, a piece of junk. But at the time it was real cool, right? So that was one thing. And then I think just along the way, there have just been little moments where I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. I remember my first actual Apple computer and, it was a bit of a beast and you had to lug it around, so, but it was, purple or whatever random color it was back then that I could buy it in. Right. And it was I just loved those things. Along the way, I've loved so many different things and I'm like, that's cool. Right. Marilyn and I were definitely early adopters of everything they would let us test at Amazon. We were like, yeah, sign me up.
Yep.
I'll test it. Right. So put me on the list. Okay. Um, so if you could make a marketing word or buzzword disappear, or technology, we'll use technology buzzwords too, disappear, what would it be? What phrase or concept would you just be like, goodbye?
Oh, wow. So that's a really tough one.
Marilyn's ready.
Marilyn, go on, Marilyn. You give me time to think.
Surveys, all in Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. I think I'd get rid of vanity metric.
Yes, please.
Why?
So it feels to me as though it's meant as an insult, but it sounds like it's an excuse.
Got it. It is meant as I mean it as an insult when I say it.
Yeah, but kind of people use it as an excuse. It's like, well, of course our CEO needs vanity metrics, so we got to do it.
Like,
and it's just like,
cares about it? Right.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, so you're kind of saying I'm going to do the wrong thing, but this is my excuse.
Yes.
I don't really like that. I think we should get rid of that as a phrase, because you can blame someone else with it. It's down to the CEO's vanity. It's not. It's down to your laziness.
Should I just say dumb metric then instead of
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, just do these dumb metrics out.
Let's
Useless
measure your
metric.
stupid metrics that make no sense.
Yeah.
I
mean, I can't get rid of this because it's impossible to get rid of at this stage, but because I'm working in consumer right now, I wish that I could get rid of the Google quality score on websites. I wish that I could make Google, the doom that is Google making me build pages that are shitty customer experiences. I wish I could make it go away. Right. I basically am like, it feels like they're over indexing on, steroid, purchases and like protein powders, like buy now, 30% off, buy now. Like that's what the Google vanity score, quality score wants. Right. And I'm like, you can't do that on a page that needs actual experience. It's just lame. I don't want to put a click button here. Right. So it's finding that balance between good customer experience and feeding that particular beast when you're using PPC. Right. So that's I'm like, I know it's not exactly a buzzword, but I hate it. So, okay. Last one. What habit you were early on, you were an engineer. What engineer habit have you never shaken?
Oh God, I love numbers. I'm sorry. I think it's having dissed vanity metrics that only became popular because there were lots of numbers there and people felt good by them. Yeah. I love numbers, but I love people who really understand numbers, and I think can actually get information out of it, and they can understand sample sizes when you come to looking at data.
Yeah.
As an example, I mean, sample size is probably my pet peeve. People compare three things and go, well, definitely thing A is bigger because this one is, and the other two are just like, no. So yeah, I think people who understand maths, I really like that. Talking numbers, talking data.
Love it. Marilyn, what would you ditch from your earlier versions of you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, what would I ditch? So I was just going to agree with everything.
All right, what would you keep? Not ditch. What would you keep? Sorry, I changed this.
There was so much of my earlier life I would ditch. No, I'm going to agree with Mike here. I think that, like, everybody should know this about me by now, but I think there's a difference between qualitative and quantitative. I think you need both. I think that understanding data is really, really important. And agree with you, Mike. I hate it when people are like, this was 30% better. And you're like, yeah, but what? It's also the hard number there. Because if it's 30% better because 3 people said it, it's not real. And you're just trying to make me do your thing by presenting the information in a way that tells your story instead of the whole story.
Yeah, because using data can still be, there's still a storytelling element, right? Like, so. So I was an accountant in the beginning of my career. So I mean, this will be the 4th time I've made this comment that if you're 10 cents off, you could be $10,000 off. And so go find the difference. So if you try to reconcile something, if you're trying to get to the bottom of something and you give up when there's just a tiny thing you don't know, that thing you don't know might be huge. And I think that's true when you're writing code. I think it's true when you have an outage. I think it's true when the money's missing. I think it's true. Because the tiny thing you see could be a bottomless pit when you open it up. You just don't know. So you got to go chase it.
I love that. It reminds me of a place where we used to work, where we used to talk about leakage a lot. And I was like floored by the fact that we just accepted that.
Yeah.
We didn't make it where it was supposed to get to.
These accounts won't balance. Marilyn and I are like, what?
Why is that an okay answer? I don't understand.
Exactly. So yeah, super true. Mike, thank you. This was so much fun.
Leah, Marilyn, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and having a fun conversation with us. We always enjoy learning something new and getting to talk about things that we find fun.
Wait, when is your next book coming out, Mike?
Yeah.
My next book.
I feel like you should write one.
Sorry?
I feel like you should write one. I feel like there's a book here, my friend.
So I have written a book, which is probably not going to excite many members of the audience. So I wrote a book about my speed skating club.
Oh, what?
So it's nearly 10 years ago now. It had its 100th birthday, and we wrote a book, and there were 3 of us, and we got together and we got all the history, and it was really awesome. And we actually ended up selling, and believe it or not, there's about 200 people involved in speed skating in the UK, and we sold about 200 copies. So I didn't get rich on it, but it was super fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's nearly 10 years ago. Maybe I should write another book.
You should write another book.
The B2B world needs it.
Yes, it does.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us once again, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks again, Mike. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.